The Canadian Agri-Food Policy Institute is driving bold policy solutions for a resilient Canadian agri-food system and building a stronger future for Canadian agriculture. Visit capi-icpa.com to discover how.
Shaun Haney here with Real Agriculture and Real Ag Radio, and we're in Raleigh, North Carolina at the BASF headquarters and joined right now by Ray Daniels, who leads the sustainability initiatives in Canada for the company. Ray, how are we doing?
Good, good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to chat with you. So there's a lot happening in the sustainability file. Obviously, we've talked to a number of people here at BASF here today, and everybody's brought up sustainability. I guess right now in 2025, where does sustainability fit into the BASF strategy?
Well, I mean, 2025 is a little bit different from 2024 with the sustainability, and we've had to evolve our strategy, I think, over the past year or two. But sustainability is still very core to what we're trying to do with our products, with our customers, with all of our initiatives. And it really boils down to trying to find ways to add more value into the business for farmers and for our retail and for our entire channel. And so for us, it has definitely evolved, but it has been evolving since we started this journey probably over 20 years ago.
Yeah, now we've seen changes in North America, right? We've got a Trump administration here in the U.S.
Yeah.
We had an election in Canada, still Liberal government, but maybe not talking about sustainability in the same way that the Trudeau government was. Does the market still care as much about sustainability as we did maybe, say, 24 months ago?
Yeah, I think the market very much cares about it. I mean, there are some statistics I actually can share with you. One is we care because of our customers care, and the reason our customers care is the market cares. Now, obviously, there's two different viewpoints, Canada versus U.S., but I think when you get down to boil it down to consumers still care about it. There was a survey done earlier this year out of Yale. I think the survey was performed around March timeframe, and they released it in May. And what they were doing is they were polling consumers to ask, and of course, registered voters, consumers across the U.S., their perspectives on sustainability and their leanings now around climate change and other factors given the election. And in that, one question specific to agriculture came out, which was how do American voters support policies that provide federal funding to help farmers improve practices to protect and restore soils, so it holds more carbon, and so forth, and how do they feel about these practices and how it relates to sustainability? So no surprise, over 88% of Democrats responded, yes, we very much support this. It reflects our values. When they looked at moderates, it was somewhere still in the 80s range. But interestingly enough, when they asked conservative Republicans, that same question, does it reflect your values? Over, I believe, 78% of them said, yes, this reflects our values. So,
and I've seen the electoral map. Those are your customers.
Those are our customers. So when I think about it, if you look at what the consumers are demanding, consumers still want sustainable products, and consumers are representatives of who our customers are, or who our voters are, and then ultimately who the products our farmers produce go to. So at the end of the day, I don't think the demand for sustainability has changed. It's just potentially the conversation around it has changed, and I think that's where everybody's having to evolve to that.
And one thing I've noticed, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but is the messaging around it. So we've moved from sustainability from like a true like ideological purity kind of lens to sustainability. It also ties to economic sustainability as well as environmental sustainability. We've sort of changed the message a little bit. Is that fair?
I'd say it's fair. I think it also forces practicality. I mean, if you look at sustainability, and I think this is the era we're in with the administration's perspective on this and some of the other public perception around sustainability, it's forcing both corporates and NGOs to get much more clear on the results of what we're trying to get out of sustainability and proving those results out in a way that's profitable, makes economic sense, and it's palatable for society. And I think that's where we've had to shift rather from really blue sky ideas to how's this practically going to work in a world where food prices are rising, economic challenges are on the horizon. Like how does that work? And we have to make sure that sustainability works in that. And I would say that's the fun of it, but it's also the challenge of it, right? There's going to be some areas where we have successes, but there's also going to be areas where we don't have success, and we have to learn quickly along the way.
Now, one of the stories that applies to sustainability is bioenergy and biofuels. And right now, both Canada and the U.S. are facing a lot of challenges that are trade-related, and that's impacting canola growers in Canada. It's impacting soybean growers here in the U.S. in major ways, and kind of the same outcome, which is lack of trade of both those oil seeds. One of the things that people are talking a lot about is creating more domestic demand to replace that China market. That's where things like renewable diesel come very much into play. What's BASF's position on renewable diesel demand?
On renewable diesel demand, well, let me back it up and explain how we approach sustainability, and maybe I'll help color my response to renewable diesel demand and where we see that going for Canada and U.S. First off, when it comes to agricultural solutions, how we approach the sustainability topic is on the really four kind of key pillars, and this is important. The first is looking at digital platforms and ways to enable farmers to access pathways for market access, or create pathways to market access for sustainable outcomes for their crops. So thinking about biofuels is an example of that. If you're going to grow canola or corn, there are programs that are in the market today in Canada as well as in the U.S. that can incentivize farmers for improving upon the carbon intensity of that feedstock. So for us, it's how do you make sure that we can get people connected in? And we've got some solutions we can talk about, I think, in a second. Also, the other areas we spend time in is advocacy, too, is ensuring some of those policies and working cross-sectorally to make sure those policies fit for what makes sense for the farmers. Oftentimes we see, and we've seen this with 45Z, a lot of different perspectives go into the mix, but not all of those are going to make sense for a farmer.
Right.
And that's why I go back to the comment I made earlier around sustainability. It's got to be practical. We have to make sure that from a farming and agricultural community, those perspectives are taken into consideration when we look at policies that, for biofuels or any other sustainability aspects. The third aspect we look at, too, and I think this is kind of ancillary but supportive, is around products and technology at BASF. So trying to understand how our current portfolio can help aid, not just in biofuels, but sustainable outcomes, period. Can we improve upon the carbon intensity of a crop through crop protection or hybrid canola seeds or varieties of soy? Or looking at our pipeline long term to ensure can we reliably supply that feedstock for the long term in the future with a changing climate and weather patterns. So those are examples of where we're also spending a lot of time. And I would say fourthly, which isn't really necessary to biofuels in these topics, but it's important to know we still have an internal focus on improving our own emissions and creating more circular models within our own business so that we can kind of walk the talk, if you will, as it relates to what we're asking sometimes of, or what's being asked of our customers. So that's kind of where we fit. And you asked me about where we sit with the domestic demand for biofuels. I think what we would still like to see, I think, in Canada is it creates an opportunity, I think, for canola that is in a market right now, as you mentioned, where you've got trade wars, you've got tariffs, you've got demand volatility, you got price pressure on commodities themselves. This can create an opportunity, another way for farmers, and think about a new market to move canola to. I was at a Food Leadership Summit conference last week in Calgary, and there was a farmer who quoted that if we were simply to, and I haven't checked the numbers on this, but he said if we simply were to raise the demand, the blending target for renewable diesel in Alberta, which we can blend that with soy, we can blend that with canola. He was a canola farmer, so you know where he's coming from. He said if we could raise that from 2% to 5%, we would consume the deficit of what we would be trading to China in terms of canola, and that's in one province. And that's just by raising the blending standard for Alberta on renewable diesel alone. So for us, we see this is an opportunity for farmers, and it's also an opportunity to make sure we continue to support and supply the canola industry in a way that's viable for the future. So yeah, I think it creates opportunity domestically for Canadians, but also the same perspective here in the U.S. as well.
Right, and what needs to, from your perspective at BASF, what needs to happen for that end goal to be achieved then?
Well, a couple things. Well, let's talk about where we are today. We are in Canada. We're looking at the Clean Fuel Regulations. The specific regulation I'm talking about here is today. That regulation does take into consideration canola and feedstock for biofuels. The challenge with that regulation today, as it stands, even though it does give credit to bio-based feedstocks, what it does do is it combines the scores with soy and corn, the CI score. So in the end, it really doesn't reflect the true value of what canola can produce. So today, that's where we stand. But we know in 2026, the Environment Canada is set to update the clean fuel regulations, which will hopefully include a specific score for canola versus soy and corn, which all of them need their own scores. They have each they're all grown differently.
Yep.
So getting its own score would be a great start, where that would actually give canola farmers the ability to credit back, for, like, at least see what their impact is and how that counts towards those targets. We'd also like to see, too, the ability not just to have a single score, but are there opportunities to improve upon that score via practices on farm like nitrogen management and others. And again, there's a lot of specifics to that, and there's a lot of, I think, complexity. But what we'd like to see is the opportunity for agriculture to play a bigger role in reducing the emissions for the oil and gas sector through biofuels. I think what needs to happen in that regard, though, is not just this is what we want to have happen. We got to work together across different sectors to be able to advocate for this. And I know that's always kind of a cliche thing. So we just come together and collaborate.
If we just communicate, things are better.
Yeah. We talk about it. But the challenge with that is we're two different industries working on many priorities.
So you're
right
talking
now.
ag and energy.
Ag and energy. And so one of the things that we'd like to see more of, and I think there's appetite for this, is some more cross collaboration between the two. I know when I speak to stakeholders in the biofuels value chain and oil and gas, they're very interested in what takes place in agriculture, because they see that as a critical piece to the future of their biofuels mandates that they have. Agriculture can look at this. From an agriculture perspective, I think we see some opportunity there, but it's okay. What's this mean for me and my farm, and how does that work? So I think what we'd like to see is more connections, and we'd like to, as BASF, foster and convene some of those connections. And I'll tell you the power of doing so is an example, and it goes back to the pillar I mentioned earlier of advocacy. Earlier this year in the U.S., this is prior to actually just after, in Trump's inauguration, right, and all the changes that took place there. We convened a meeting between the ethanol and the corn growers and the kind of that ethanol biofuel segment here in the U.S. Yeah. And we did it actually here at our site in Research Triangle Park, North Carolina, hosted it at our Center for Sustainability. And what was unique is bringing those different players across those value chains together to share ideas, to learn from one another around what each other's needs are, led to some great introductions and collaboration. But what took place after that was key, because in the first 100 days of Trump's presidency, we saw so many different climate policies get reversed. We saw climate smart agricultural practices come under fire, conservation funding get taken away. And so and then 45Z in the U.S., which is what we've been waiting for quite some time.
Still waiting.
It's still waiting. We still have to wait on that till next year at least. But what we've been waiting for, what helped us to that collaboration, it gave us a chance to be able to work together whenever it came time for the one big beautiful bill to do advocacy on Capitol Hill together, to start pushing for what makes sense for farmers and agriculture, and putting those perspectives together. And I think, I'm not claiming credit for this, but between us and I think our stakeholder groups, we were able to successfully see that show up in that bill, even though we are still waiting on a ruling from a rule set from the Treasury. And different groups are working together to have that established. Yeah. But that collaboration between agriculture and energy was phenomenal. And I think that is what helps keep that bill, that program in place, which is going to help farmers here tremendously, especially with the trade barriers we have now. And I think the same kind of concept would be valuable in Canada. Partly is I'm trying to understand the needs of both sectors and then work towards some joint advocacy efforts on that regard.
And in my perception, with renewable diesel and SAF, there is greater chance for the collaboration. Like historically with ethanol and corn, there was always some friction between agriculture and energy. Whereas big energy seems to be a little bit more collaborative in nature. They're investing. Yeah. They're investing in renewable diesel and see the opportunity there. So maybe we can jump some of those initial steps.
I think so. I think what it shows agriculture too, at least in Canada, if you look at Imperial's facility that they opened in Strathcona,
Massive.
Yeah, and then you look at planned expansions from Cargill's crush plant in Saskatchewan. You're seeing these different investments that are being made because there's a signal there. And again, I still think in Canada we're a little bit early, but those signals are coming through that they're in this to commit. I know in the oil and gas sector too, there's also, which may not be as public, but there's a lot of investment into updating facilities to do co-processing, which allows for even further capacity. So what I'm getting at is I think it would help agriculture to understand like there's investments being made, and these are big investments into this biofuels play that these organizations are waiting to see these. They want this feedstock coming in because they have goals. They have trade, whether it be to the U.S., and also whether it be to Europe. And I'm speaking specifically of renewable diesel in this regard, but there's a lot of commitments and a lot of market opportunities for them, and they are going to be reliant upon agriculture to meet those commitments. And so that's where, again, I think it creates a unique opportunity for ag.
Yeah, and for, a lot of talk about canola trade, we were talking about earlier, a lot of people think about China, but the largest market actually for Canadian canola is the U.S., and the why of that is feedstock for renewable diesel.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times we talk about the integrated market between the two countries, and that we talk about that with beef and with pork, but biofuels is another integrated supply chain story. Canada's the largest purchaser of U.S. ethanol. Canada's biggest customer for canola is the United States. It fits together in that topic.
Yeah, I think what's opportunity too for both countries in this regard is both countries can meet their targets when it comes to renewable fuels via canola, right? So we can do that in Canada, right? We have, beyond what we ship to the U.S., we can still work towards those targets in Canada under clean fuel regulations. I think it gives the farmers and it gives the market opportunity to figure out which way they want to move their product. Secondly, I think in the U.S., when we look at renewable fuel standards and what we're trying to achieve from a U.S. perspective, canola, which is majority of that is Canadian canola, but North American canola, that within Dakotas as well as what's coming out of Canada can help the U.S. meet their targets as well. And I know there's been some discussion around cutting the RIN values to 50% on things that are non-U.S. Vice versa, you've seen British Columbia put a mandate on only feedstocks that are Canadian count for the low carbon fuel standards. And the way we view that is that really we need to look at it from a North American perspective, because if we want to hit those targets, the U.S. is going to need Canadian canola to do that. At the same time, if we want to hit our targets in Canada, we're probably going to need. We're going to need ethanol, but we're also going to need domestic consumption of canola. So making sure that the policies fit both ways, I think, is going to be valuable for the future.
Great stuff. Ray, thanks a lot for joining us here today. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure.